Dr. Luis O. Amano, Vice President for Research, Development and Extension. Dr. Rebecca Rosario Obercasio, Director Center for Teaching Excellence of the Bicol University. Other officials, faculty, and staff. May also greet the Director of the Publications Office, my colleague from the Philippine Normal University, Dr. Maripaz Morales. Other presenters in this conference, guests, ladies and gentlemen, a pleasant day to everyone. I'd like to first extend my warmest gratitude to Dr. Amano and Dr. Bercasio for inviting me to deliver a keynote address for this sixth regional conference on promoting world-class education. I am so honored and privileged to be invited in this conference. Sustaining quality assurance in teaching and research in the midst of the pandemic is my topic for this keynote message. In this message, I'll provide some review of the global directions that we need to consider, along with some regional directions that we need to think of when we are implementing our education programs and even our research projects. And then I'd like to put into context as well the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, both in education and research in general, and then what have been the responses of the different agencies in charge of education, particularly in the Philippines, and then look into the QA aspect of sustaining the quality and the standards of our teaching and research in the middle of this COVID-19 pandemic. When we are talking of the global directions, we cannot help but talk about the UN Sustainable Development Goals, the 17 goals to transform our world, from goal number 1, no poverty, to goal number 17, which is partnership for the goals. And in particular, we talk about quality education, which is the goal says ensuring inclusive and equitable quality education and promote lifelong learning opportunities for all. And according to the data, to the report, prior to the COVID-19, progress towards inclusive and equitable quality education was already very slow, or too slow, with over 200 million children still predicted to be out of school by 2030. And they're saying also that inequalities in education have been exacerbated, or have been exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic. In low-income countries, according to the report, children's school completion rate is only 34% in the poorest 20% of households, as opposed to 79% in richest 20% of the households. And these are other implications of the COVID-19. The closure of the schools kept 90% of all students out of school. And this has also impacted as well our own Filipino students. Remote learning, according to the report, remains out of reach for at least 500 million students globally. And even prior to the pandemic, in a study by Vladimirova and LeBlanc in 2015, they're already arguing that when you're talking of quality education, particularly in reference to SDG number 4, you need to consider many other factors, from health, gender, peaceful and inclusive societies, to growth and development, to climate change, inequality, and so on and so forth, if you are really to advance and promote quality education. That it is not, that there has to be a holistic approach, a comprehensive approach in advancing and implementing quality education. And this was even prior to the pandemic. So how much more should be prioritized then, now that we are in the pandemic. In the Southeast Asia, I took note here of the priority areas of the Southeast Asian Ministry of Education organization, or SINEO, where they have identified 7 priority areas from 2015 to 2035, and such areas are all focusing, of course, on education, reforming teacher education, harmonizing higher education and research, adopting a truly 21st century curriculum, and so on. And while we have those UN Sustainable Development Goals globally, and we have the SIMIO targets or priorities within the region, um, comes COVID-19. And so, like, according to the report, as of March 10, according to the World Health Organization, confirmed cases have already reached more than 117 million, with more than 2.5 million reported deaths or casualties. And in the Philippines, as of March 10 as well, we have more than 600,000 cases with more than 12,500 deaths. And unfortunately, it keeps on increasing. This is another data showing where the Philippines is compared to that of India, Indonesia, Bangladesh, Nepal, Myanmar, and Sri Lanka, insofar as COVID is concerned. So given all this context, you have all that directions, the global directions, the UN Sustainable Development Goals on one hand, and you also have the regional goals, particularly that of SIMIO. Of course, there are other goals, like if you talk of UNESCO, we can even include that. And then you have those goals in the middle now of the COVID-19 pandemic. So how do you reconcile that now? And how did we respond to these challenges? For the Commission on Higher Education, in terms of the implementation of higher education programs, CMO number 4, series of 2020, talks about the guidelines on the implementation of flexible learning. And so all um, higher education institutions implemented the so-called flexible learning, which is a combination of synchronous and asynchronous and other blended forms of learning. Others have even using modules in the implementation of the flexible learning. At the Philippine Normal University, our flexible learning is a combination of synchronous, asynchronous, and the use of modules, particularly for our undergraduate students. For the Department of Education, DepEd Memorandum number 67, series of 2020, issued in October last year, provided the guidelines on the implementation of alternative learning system programs in light of the Basic Education Learning Continuity Plan. So there is this learning continuity plan for all basic education schools. And I understand that insofar as the private sector is concerned, they also have their own flexible learning plan or learning continuity plan implemented in 2020. So you have the responses of the higher education and also the responses of basic education. The question now is, how do you sustain quality assurance? How do you sustain quality assurance in the implementation of flexible learning? How do you sustain quality assurance in the conduct of research among higher education institutions in particular? According to Harvey, just a review of some of the basic concepts in quality assurance. Assurance of quality in higher education is the collections of policies, procedures, systems, and practices, which could be internal or external to the institution. And they are all designed to achieve, maintain, and enhance quality of all the services, both the academic and the administrative services. So what is quality assurance in particular? It checks the quality of processes or outcomes. There are a variety of purposes for quality assurance: out of compliance, could be control, could be accountability, could be improvement or enhancement of the services or the programs. It also refers to the collection of different methods on how to check, maintain, and enhance quality in the different processes in a given institution, with certain tools and instruments that are made available for such checking or monitoring. And quality assurance could be done at different levels. It can be done at the institutional level, at the program level, and at the course or subject level. Between quality and standards, so what do we mean by standards? Standards are measurable indicators and are used with means to compare and assess things. There are certain criteria. Quality, on the other hand, does not have a standard concept because mostly it refers to the processes of education or to the process of education. How are things done? How are the lectures being done, for instance. That's still according to Harvey. According to him, there are 5 quality concepts. Quality as exceptional or excellent. So the main target is to exceed, the high standards. Quality as perfection or consistency, which is kind of developing some kind of a culture of perfection and consistency in all the services and programs that are being offered by an institution. Quality as fitness for purpose, meaning the judgment judged by the fulfillment level of purpose. Quality as value for money, how efficient, how effective are the services or are the processes in the delivery of education. And quality as transformation, which is almost like an endless process to improve all services in an academic institution. So when we are to focus on quality assurance in higher education, we talk of so many things. We talk holistically of QA in terms of the QMS or the quality management system, higher education management in particular. What are the tools and procedures that they are using? How do they ensure quality assurance in teaching and learning? And how about the role of the information management in ensuring or in making sure that there will be an integrated or integrative management of all the information in an academic institution. Perspectives on quality vary, depending on the stakeholders, depending on the perspectives of the different stakeholders. If you're the students, quality is about what's the use, practical use and usefulness of everything that the university or the college is giving them for future employment. Also with personal fulfillment. If you are a professor or a teacher, the focus of your quality is the processes of learning. How do you ensure that the students are learning? If you belong to the management, so it's basically looking at what are the achievements of the institution, whether such achievements are tangible and intangible, vis-a-vis, for instance, strategic plans or strategic directions. For the alumni, they're looking at job opportunities as the focus of quality. If you are an employer, you look at the competence and capabilities and qualities of the graduates that you are taking in for employment. For politicians, they're more interested into numbers. They're more interested into the number of graduates, the numbers of alumni, percentage of passing rate, and so on in board examinations, for instance. But for the entire society and community, focus would be, are these institutions producing ethically and socially responsible individuals or citizens? And at the same time, the society is expecting education institutions to produce new knowledge to cope with the present and future challenges, especially right now that we are in the middle of the pandemic. Very quickly, I'm not going to discuss all of this, but just to show you how comprehensive the concept of quality assurance when you're talking of academic institution is concerned. You have here the level, the output, the outcome, and the impact. So for instance, for lectures, the output, the expected output, students will pass the exam. The outcome, students with knowledge and skills on topic of the lecture. The impact, students successfully master the final exams and of course the graduation. So there are different ways of looking holistically when you're talking of quality assurance in a particular program. Here is another perspective. They were saying that there are 4 broad types of standards in higher education. You have the academic standards, which relate to the intellectual abilities of the students. You have standards of competence relating to the technical abilities of students. You have services standards, referring to the services provided by the institution to the students. And you have the organizational standards, principles and procedures by which the institution assures that it is providing the appropriate learning and research environment in the institution and among the students. That was from Harvey in 2012. And so Nicholson in 2011 was arguing a common criticism of quality assurance is that pays little attention to educational processes and educational theory and or student learning. And as a result, improvement or enhancement becomes only incidental. But if you look at the overall picture of quality assurance in teaching and learning, you can see here that there are 2 major paradigms or 2 critical paradigms that have been mentioned. You have On the first column, you have the instruction paradigm, and the other one is the learning paradigm. The instruction paradigm being the traditional perspective, and you have the learning paradigm, which is the new perspective when it comes to education. So just to provide an example here, in terms of mission and purposes, you provide and deliver instruction, transfer of knowledge, offer courses, and so on. But in the learning program, in the most current perspective, when you're talking of mission and purposes of academic institution, it's not delivering instruction, but producing learning, eliciting students' discovery and construction of knowledge, creating powerful learning environments, improving the quality of learning, achieving success for diverse students. So QA in the past was looking at this, but QA at the moment are looking is already looking at this, the ones on the right column. The criteria for success, for instance, that learning varies, there are the inputs and the resources, quality of entering students. But if you look at this, look at the criteria for success here. Learning varies, yes. Learning and student success outcomes are being looked into already, along with quality of exiting students. Here, you look at the quality of entering students. The entry requirements are more important than that of the exiting students. But here in the learning paradigm, the quality of exiting students becomes even more important. So just some examples. Here are other parameters in terms of teaching and learning structures. Atomistic, parts prior to a whole. So on the other hand, when you're talking of the learning paradigm, it's more holistic and comprehensive. Whole prior to parts. Learning are held constant and time varies. Learning environments and so on. In terms of learning theory, knowledge exists out there. That's the original or the traditional perspective. In the learning paradigm perspective, in terms of learning theory, knowledge exists in each person's mind and is shaped by individual experiences. Knowledge is constructed, created. Learning is nesting and interacting of frameworks. So learning is student-centered and controlled. Active learner required, but not live students required. So there's that paradigm shift, so to speak, from the instruction to the learning paradigm. Here is another one in terms of the role, for instance, nature of roles. Faculty are primarily lecturers. Faculty and students act independently and in isolation. Teachers classify and sort students, homogeneous, heterogeneous groupings of students. Any expert can teach. Line governance, independent actors. On the other hand, on the learning paradigm, you have faculty are primarily designers of learning methods and environments. Faculty and students work in teams with each other and other staff. Teachers develop every student's competencies and talents. All staff are educators who produce student learning and success. So there is that element of empowerment. Empowering learning is challenging and complex. There's a shared governance and teamwork among the different independent actors. So that's the paradigm shift, looking at the quality. And of course, the shifting, we've seen this in terms of industry, from industry 1.0 to industry 5.0, according to McClellan. And also you have heard of the society 1.0 to society 5.0, from society 1.0, the hunter-gatherer society, to agrarian, to industrial, information, and the super smart society, according to Kaylan Ren in 2020. So this is an example, another way of showing the transition from society 1.0 to society 5.0. That's 1.0 to 2.0, 3.0, the industrial society, and then 4.0, information society. And then, of course, you are entering society 5.0. And they're saying right now that we are heading, if not, we are already here, into the so-called society 5.0. We talk of big data already, and making use of big data, the cloud technology and so on, as basis for solutions for better human life. So that's what they're talking in society 5.0. You have the current information society that we have as well, 4.0, the cyberspace, the cloud computing, and so on, the so-called physical space in different aspects. But when you talk of society 5.0, you have the cyberspace as well, but you're talking of big data, artificial intelligence, and so on. So how 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 can education and how can education institution cope up with such changes in the society. And here is how education adjusts or adapts to the different situations. So you have education 1.0, this is education 3.0 to education 5.0, more on innovation and making use of all the industries and the technologies that we have, according to Cedillo and others. Um, 3.0, education 3.0 to education 4.0, and then to 5.0. This is 5.0 actually. So structured content learner-centered activities, education 4.0, emerging sense of ownership of own learning. But when you're talking of education 5.0, they're saying learner-driven learning. Learners as agents of their own learning. Learners as partners and collaborators. Seamless learning, not bounded by weeks and semesters and location. That's what they're already talking about when you talk of education 5.0. Personalized learning pathways, professors on demand. No, in other words, they're no longer just confined in schools, but it seems like they're more mobile and they're making themselves more available anywhere, according to Schleicher in 2019. And you've encountered also ideas like the future skills, the future of learning and higher education, according to Ehlers. And according to that, there are future skill profiles, and they have identified 17 profiles through qualitative analysis. And each profile contains several competencies. So you can see here, it's quite small: learning, literacy, self-efficacy, self-determination, self-competence, reflective competence, up to communication competence. So 17 profiles, 17 competencies that need to be addressed in the future, because these are the future skill profiles. And talking of planning and research, for instance, you have the idea from Slaughter of the foresight planning for research as well. You have possible future, might it happen? Plausible future, could it happen? Probable future, how likely is it to happen? You're also talking of probable future, how likely is it to happen? And preferred future, what do I want to happen? So there are implications of research, in possible future, research in plausible future, research in probable future, and research in preferred future. And lastly, I'd like to just share with you what we intend to do at the Philippine Normal University when we talk of quality assurance. And this is a framework of quality assurance at the Philippine Normal University. This is still a work in progress. We are still trying to develop this. But more or less, this is how we intend to do it. You have all the inputs here as the NCTE law, the National Center for Teacher Education law, mandating PNU as the National Center for Teacher Education. But we have to consider all the other ASEAN and other external QA standards, the profile of the university, the VMGO core values. You have to consider also the ASEAN Quality Reference Framework, the Philippine Qualifications Framework. How about the customer requirements and global trends and societal needs? We have to address all of them. And as inputs to whatever we wanted to do in terms of ensuring that quality assurance is present in all instructional services, in research services, extension, student services, administrative services, human resources management, capital resources management, and financial management. And at the center there, crucially playing its role, is actually leadership and governance. And the goal is to produce these outputs: satisfaction from the stakeholders, attainment of the VMGO, quality programs and services, attainment of whatever strategic development plans that the institution has, and the university contributing to the Philippine education and beyond. So in summary, this is how we envision um, quality assurance to be implemented in at the Philippine Normal University. Let me end by sharing with you some thoughts on education. This is in a recent conference presented education from Miss Audrey Azoulay, the UNESCO Director General. At a time when countries are making difficult choices and trade-offs to turn societies around, education must be our top priority, our pillar for recovery. And yet only a minuscule share, on average less than 1%, has been set aside for education and training in national stimulus packages, especially right now in the middle of the pandemic. Financing education, according to her, is not a cost. It is our most crucial long-term investment. If we do not allocate this funding now, we will face a bleaker future, bleaker than what we are seeing at the moment. And finally, um, education and the future of work, according to Michelle Weiss, for long life learning, which is a new one as well. If colleges and universities fail to launch graduates successfully for the first time around, how in the world will they be able to support the 20 or 30 more job transitions to come? Because of the very quick and fast advances in information and communication technology, our access to knowledge and all these skills and information becomes very much closer and closer to each one of us. Of course, there's that question of the digital divide there, but then at the same time, institutions, academic institutions, should be able to not just sustain the quality assurance, but making sure that what they are still offering will still become relevant, not just now in the present situation, but in the near future, or at least in the next 10 years or 20 years. That's why um, futures thinking becomes even more critical right now in sustaining quality assurance in teaching and research in the academy. I think with that, I'd like to thank everyone. So thank you. I hope that I was able to give some inputs that would more or less trigger your interest on how to sustain quality assurance in teaching and in doing research. So maraming salamat po. Magandang umaga. Stay safe, everyone, and God bless. Thank you. Thank you very much. And congratulations to Bicol University for organizing this 6th regional conference on promoting world-class education. Thank you very much.